Now, how does React Native work under the hood though? If you're building a React and React Native app, then you're typically writing code like this, which should look very familiar if you worked with React.js before, maybe or most likely for building browser-based apps. This is a React component, what you see here. And it's just one way of writing such a component. We could also use the function keyword instead of defining an arrow function, and we could also use a class-based component. But it's code like this which you will write for React Native, and it's code like this that will be compiled to real native app code, so which will be bundled into a real native app in the end. Now, if you take a closer look at the code snippet on the left here, you will see two components, two JSX elements in there, which you don't know from web development: the view and the text element. These are some of these special components that are exposed by React Native, which will be compiled by React Native. It is worth noting though that it's really just the views, just this JSX code that is compiled, not the JavaScript logic itself. I will come back to that in a second. So the components, the JSX elements you use, are compiled to native elements for the respective platforms. And to make this a bit easier to understand, take a look at this comparison table here. Here we got a bunch of elements as we would use them in the browser if we would be using React DOM, and then the equivalents for the native platforms, and then the components exposed by React Native to target those equivalents. So for example, if you want to display an input element where users can enter some text, then when building a web app, we would use the HTML input element, which is available in JSX when we're using React DOM. If we would be building a native Android app with Java or Kotlin, then it would be the built-in added text widget that is provided by Android, which we need to build. For iOS, it would be the UI text field element. And with React Native, we would use the built-in text input component, which is provided by React Native and which will then be compiled to edit text for Android or to UI text field for iOS. So React Native maps and compiles reusable components like text input or view or many other components about which you will learn throughout the course to their respective platform equivalents. That's one of the main jobs React Native will take care of. But what about the logic? I mentioned that those views, the JSX elements, are compiled to their native equivalents. But what about the JavaScript code you write outside of JSX? What about all these functions, if statements, state management? What about that? Well, unlike the UI elements, the logic is not compiled. The UI elements, which are those components exposed by React Native, are compiled as you learned. But the logic which you write in JavaScript is actually not compiled, but instead it's running on a JavaScript thread that's hosted by React Native in the native app that was built. So React Native basically spins up a simple JavaScript process as part of your native app that's being built, and it manages this process for you, and it allows this process to talk to the underlying native platform. And therefore, your JavaScript code will run as JavaScript in the native app that's being built, but it will then talk to the underlying Android or iOS platform through a basic translation bridge, you could say, that is provided by React Native as part of your native app. That's how you can think about this. And that is it for now. That's how React Native works under the hood and what it does for you. You don't need to know more. You can, of course, dive into the official docs if you do want to learn more, but that is what you should know in order to work with React Native, because I believe it's always important to have a basic understanding of how a tool works And this is how React Native works.